Hello and welcome back to the Halo series. My name is Douglas Brown, CEO at Halo Consulting. Today we are joined by Mark Dompier, Head of Belonging and Vice President at PetSmart. Thanks for coming to hang out today, Mark. How are you?
Absolutely. Super excited to be here and super excited to share a little bit about our journey.
If you're new to this event, Halo hosts monthly virtual roundtables covering current trends in the HR tech and DEI space. Don't forget to check out the Halo mini-series, where we hear from executives taking a deep dive into a multi-part series discussing what is keeping them up at night. If you've enjoyed this content, hit that like and subscribe button, and be sure to visit Halo's LinkedIn page to subscribe to the Halo Content Hub, which summarizes current market trends and recaps past events, and that link can be found in the description. Throughout our session, we will cover creating inclusive leadership for a diverse workplace. Before we kick off the questions, Mark, let's get started with you. Can you share with our audience where you started your career and how it has evolved into joining PetSmart as the Head of Belonging and Vice President?
Yes, absolutely. Excited to share a little bit in a nutshell, I promise. I started off with consumer goods packaged, CPG, good consumer goods companies, Kimberly-Clark, Huggies diapers, Kleenex tissues in learning and development. Spent a bunch of years there in the Midwest before going into consulting. Did the consulting gig for a bit, lived out of a suitcase. Glad I did it when I was younger because it is a very unique lifestyle. Learned a lot, but joined Target, a great organization, still going for toothpaste and leave $100 poorer. They've got a great model, but PetSmart called one day. It was the middle of winter, and they had this opportunity in Phoenix, Arizona, and it really aligned exactly with what I wanted to do. And so came over to do change management, learning and development, organizational development and design. And then kind of as a side hustle, I would say, I started working on diversity and inclusion, something that's been, it's something that's carried through my entire career journey. I've been involved and engaged with employee resource groups and different marketing events and community engagement opportunities throughout my career. And so it was just a natural progression here at PetSmart. And one day I was approached from a senior leader who said, I think we should formalize this as actually part of your role. And that was 5+ years ago now, 2018, we stood up the Diversity Action Council, and it's just really ballooned and grown from there.
Great, thanks, Mark. Sounds like you've had a remarkable career journey from Kimberly-Clark to Target and now at PetSmart, and sounds like you've been in the role for about 5+ years as the head of belonging. So thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Let's dive into our first question. What role does leadership play in creating a culture that attracts and retains diverse talent in the greater Phoenix area? And how can leaders actively promote diversity and inclusion within their organizations and the broader community?
Leaders play a huge role. I always say the belonging team, so we've got the formalized belonging team, they absolutely are an important asset. And the recruiting team, a lot of times leaders will say, well, I need a diverse slate. So my recruiting team, HR, give me all of those diverse candidates in the diverse slate. But in the reality, we all own creating a more inclusive environment and creating a more inclusive organization. And so that starts with leaders. It truly does. It starts with leaders creating teams where people feel, I'm going to use a buzzword, but psychologically safe, where people feel like they can show up as their true authentic selves. That really, I always say inclusion, the work that we do in diversity, equity, and inclusion has to start with inclusion. People have to feel safe. They have to feel like they belong somewhere for the organization to truly grow and celebrate diversity and equity. You really have to start there. And that starts with leaders. I am not with every single team. I'm not out in 1,670 stores every day or in our 7 distribution centers or here in the offices with every team. It starts with leaders creating those cultures within their teams, but it goes beyond just inside these walls. It means leaders are creating those communities and creating talent pipelines outside of the organization as well. The organizations that they sit on boards with. We encourage our senior leaders to evaluate their LinkedIn networks, to look at their LinkedIn networks, to say, what do they look like? Is there anyone missing? Is there anyone else that you would want to cultivate relationships with externally? because there are a bunch of partners that we have at PetSmart, and we can connect those senior leaders to any one of those partners. They're always raising their hand saying, we'd love more volunteers, we'd love more board members. And so it starts with leaders, but I would say it's internal and it's external, and it's creating a space where people truly can feel like they belong. That's something that we're super passionate about at PetSmart, is that concept of belonging, because truly you can't do diversity and equity work, as I mentioned, if people don't feel like they fit within your organization to begin with.
Really well said, Mark. And I liked how you stated that it does start at the top with the leadership, creating inclusive cultures, and it's really beyond inside the four walls, and really creating those pipelines of candidates and external communities.
Absolutely. Our HR teams are great. They are great. But even like the belonging team is great, but we can only do so much. It really has to be a commitment across the board, which is, we're very fortunate at PetSmart, I would say, is we can tie all of the work that we do back to our core values as a company. One of our core values is being united together. And that united together talks about belonging, and it talks about the unconditional love that our pets show us, regardless of our differences. Our pets love us unconditionally, and that's one of our core values. So to be able to tie this work back to who we are as an organization also makes a big impact.
Let's pivot to candidate attraction. What strategies can organizations in the greater Phoenix area implement to attract diverse candidates in areas where the representation of certain demographic groups is currently low?
Absolutely. Phoenix has a lot of things going for it, but there are opportunities when it comes to certain demographic groups, as you mentioned. And so a couple of the things that we've done at PetSmart, which I encourage folks to explore, is looking at who are those schools. One, who are the schools that you're partnering with? What do your internship programs look like? And what is the makeup of those internship programs? We have about a 74% acceptance rate of our internship program. So that is a big feeder of talent to PetSmart. But folks want to have to come to the area where you're headquartered. And so, even locally, what are the organizations we're supporting? Who are we? How are we showing up in the community? How are we creating a more inclusive Phoenix? How are we creating a more inclusive Arizona? We've signed on to various pledges to say, hey, we don't support discrimination in any way. In fact, we want to be open to all. We want to create an environment in Phoenix where everyone can succeed, regardless of their backgrounds or their differences. And so being involved in the community is key. Looking at where you're sourcing talent, the schools, the programs that you have in place to source talent. And then we also have partnerships with organizations like the Professional Diversity Network. And that network, they allow us to feature our jobs on a variety of diverse job boards. And so, again, it's about where you're bringing that talent in. And I know I mentioned it just a minute ago, but it's also encouraging your senior leadership team. It's encouraging leaders at every level to think about, where are they cultivating their networks? How are they cultivating their networks? And where are they helping to attract talent from? All of those things together, no one piece, right? You could have a great internship program, but if you're not doing the other pieces, you're still going to have a lack of that, of candidate flow, as well as you're not going to create the culture where folks are going to find success. And so the sponsorships and community engagement and involvement is something that's really key. And it is something that we pride ourselves on at PetSmart. We want Arizona, we want Phoenix to know that we are in their backyard and we are hometown proud.
Outside of the programs that you just mentioned, the internships, the Professional Diversity Network, are there any other programs or initiatives that PetSmart's involved in to create a more diverse culture?
So we do a lot internally, and we share that externally as well, because I'm a big believer that when the tide rises, all of our boats rise. And so I jump on calls like this regularly to share, hey, here are some things that we've done. Take those things and run with them. Like that would be my hope. And so we do a lot when it comes to onboarding, making sure that we, every store associate that onboards with us, there's a one pager that says, hello, my name is, and there are questions about their experiences, their background, who they are at a human level versus just your typical onboarding stuff. And so So it starts right from the very beginning, and then every month we celebrate cultural milestones. So we stand up for a milestone each month of the year, whether it's, we just finished June, which we stood up for Pride Month. We also stood up in Canada. We celebrate Indigenous peoples in June. So a lot of times people are like, well, wait a minute, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in a single month. Absolutely. We have an entire cultural milestone calendar that we publish at the start of the year, and we celebrate those key dates within the month throughout our stores, distribution centers, and offices. So there's always something happening. And then one other thing that we do internally as well, and we've shared some of these externally on LinkedIn, is we do conversation prompts. So conversation prompts that are specifically related to that month's milestone topic. And they're designed to get the conversation started, because it's one thing to say, okay, it's Women's History Month. Great, happy Women's History Month. It's another when you've got conversation prompts of, who's a female leader who has made an impact on your career and why. And we create intentional conversation prompts that help get that conversation started. And then all of the other resources that are out there can be helpful. The webinars, the partners, all of those folks that share throughout the month. But it's those conversations that really get the ball rolling and help our teams start a conversation that sometimes could be uncomfortable otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like PetSmart's doing some really great things to be able to get the conversation started. From your perspective, Mark, what steps can organizations take to address and overcome any existing biases or barriers that might discourage diverse candidates from considering opportunities in the Phoenix or greater Phoenix area?
I think first and foremost, I hear the word bias and it immediately triggers training, right? Everyone talks about unconscious bias training. There's a lot of vendors out there that want to sell you unconscious bias training. There absolutely is value there. There absolutely is something to helping leaders understand their own biases that could influence or that could unintentionally cause the conversation to lean. And so one of the things we did 5-6 years ago now is we rolled out unconscious bias training to every single one of our district leaders across the entire company, so across the field. We've rolled that, JK, our CEO, and his entire senior team have gone through that unconscious bias training, and they go through a refresher twice a year. The senior team, our senior most leaders go through a refresher of kind of that unconscious bias curriculum twice a year. We've brought all directors and above now at PetSmart through that training with the intention to help them understand that, hey, guess what? We're human. There are some biases that impact the decisions that we make, and how are we more aware of those, and how do we check each other on those biases? But that alone, I'll tell you, doesn't make the difference that we wanted to see. And so we actually rolled out a bias in interviewing training as well, because there's bias that creeps specifically into the interview process. And so we talk about things like, do you have a diverse panel of interviewers? If a candidate is interviewing and no one on that panel looks like them, or sounds like them, or has experiences like them, are they really going to feel connected to the brand? Are they really going to feel connected to the organization? So thinking about, the diversity of the panel, the diversity of the folks of the candidate pool, right? Do we have a diverse candidate pool? There's a lot of research out there. Harvard's done a lot of research that says when you increase the diversity of your pools, you are significantly, and it's a huge multiple in terms of the likelihood of hiring diversity or diverse talent. And so diversity, when we talk about diversity at PetSmart, I should clarify, because a lot of people hear that diversity has almost become this dangerous or scary word in 2023, which is wild to think. But when we think about diversity, we're talking about, yes, we're talking about gender, we're talking about race, we're talking about experience, we're talking about lived experience, we're talking about career experience, we're talking about more than just, one or two boxes. We look at diversity as, how will this person add to our culture? What are the unique things about their background, experience, their race, their gender? Those are important, absolutely. Who they love, kind of their LGBTQ plus status. Are they a veteran? Like, there's a variety of things that we look at to say, do we have a diverse pool? But having diverse interviewers, having a diverse pool, making sure that you bring the organization and those who are doing hiring and making hiring decisions through the appropriate training, whether it's general unconscious bias training, but I think where we've seen probably even more success is bringing our hiring managers through interviewing training. There's a lot of case studies out there that says bias creep, but there's a lot of great research out there that shows that bias creeps into the interview process. And the more that you can help hiring managers understand that, the more likely it is, you'll never eliminate it, but the more likely it is that you will significantly reduce that bias in the hiring process.
Well said, Mark. I like that the executive team or leadership team goes through the unconscious bias training twice a year as a refresher. Is it the same for the interviewing bias training? Or is that just...
They don't go, because we don't hire, knock on wood, we don't hire as often at that level. They don't go through that twice a year. But yes, all leaders up and through the C-suite have gone through that interview training. And now we're working actually on a cadence where we bring a refresher back every year. And so it was in person when we first rolled it out, which I really recommend. We're looking at how do we make that now sustainable, as we want to look at how do we do a refresher on an annual basis, and how do we bring that training to new leaders when they start at PetSmart as well. And then finally, this would be the dream, how do we get that training out to every single leader in the entire company that could be involved in the interview process? And when you think about it, we've got 1,670 plus stores, and there are multiple leaders in those stores that are involved in the interview process. How do we do that in a way that's sustainable and that takes into mind the schedules that those individuals are faced with?
Let's move on to our next question. So establishing trust in your community is extremely critical. From your experience, Mark, how can organizations collaborate with local community groups, educational institutions, and other stakeholders to foster a sense of belonging and community for diverse candidates?
It's critical. It is critical. Not only are you making an impact on your community and you're helping those organizations continue to advance their work, those organizations are helping create a culture and are creating an environment where diverse candidates can succeed and want to see themselves. And so we've partnered with local organizations for many, many years. One community comes to mind. They are a local Phoenix-based organization that is focused on the LGBTQ plus community. We were one of the first organizations, we were the first corporation to sign on to something called the Unity Pledge that said, hey, we believe in creating a space where LGBTQ folks are celebrated and that they are welcome in the state of Arizona. Arizona hasn't always been known as the most diverse state or the most welcoming state, but I'll tell you that has changed significantly over the past even 10 years with organizations like One Community who are showing up. Partnering with the Black Chamber of Arizona, has been really great for us as we've learned kind of what are the things that we can be doing, who are the other partners that we can be leveraging and connecting with that need our support, need the support of an organization like PetSmart. So being engaged and involved in the community, volunteer, and that means not just money. By the way, I get it. We are in retail in a recession, maybe not recession. I get it. We do not have big checkbooks where we can write these big checks. And many of the viewers out there likely as well are in a similar situation. And so volunteering with those organizations, leveraging, I mentioned it earlier, leveraging leadership opportunities where leaders of the organization can sit on boards and can help influence strategy and direction. Those are all ways that you're building relationships with those community-based organizations while having an impact. Not all of us can write those big checks, but it's more than just money. That's something that I always share with folks, because oftentimes we think, well, I can't make an impact because I can't write that big check. Yes, if you can, great, do that too. But it's not just about the money. It's about finding ways to support those organizations in different ways. And we bring volunteers across PetSmart, from our stores, from our DCs, from our home offices. We bring volunteers in to support those organizations, and we bring those organizations on campus as well to speak to our team. And so it goes both ways, but it's really connecting and helping those organizations know that you are there to make an impact and you are there to support them as well.
Let's move on to our next question. What proactive steps can retailers and big brands take to foster a culture of accountability and prevent the need for the cancel culture interventions in the first place?
It has to be authentic. It has to tie back to, great question, right? Especially today, in today's environment, it has to tie back to something greater in the organization. For us, it ties back to that value of being united together. So all of the work that we do ties back there. At the end of the day, it cannot be, and I can't emphasize this enough, a check the box activity. Hey, we need to hire this, we need to hire that, we need to do this. It has to be authentic to who you are as your culture. And so we started back in 2018. We led with the term belonging. No one was, very few folks were using that term, but at the end of the day, we said, what do we want to create? We want to create a PetSmart where every associate can truly say, I belong. In our engagement survey, we ask the question just like that. We don't ask, do you feel like you belong at PetSmart? We ask, do you feel like you truly belong at PetSmart? I realize that sounds, it's just one word in there, but it causes someone to pause when you ask, do you truly fit? Do you truly belong versus just, do you belong? Okay, yep, sure. And so it causes our associate base to really reflect, to say, do I fit? Do I belong? Do I feel like I can be my authentic self? It has to start from that lens. And you have to create that culture where people feel safe and they feel included and they feel like they can talk about who they are and their authentic selves and their backgrounds and experiences. But as an organization, we have to create that environment for that to happen. And so I think that's really where an organization, you have to start. It has to be authentic. It has to be tied to who you are. And then, and only then, once you've established that safe space, you've established that culture, that's really when you can start to do what I would say the harder work. That's when you can start to say, okay, have those more challenging conversations to say, what does our representation look like? Who are our community partners? Who are in our broader networks, and how are we cultivating our networks, and how do we look at creating equitable experiences across the organization?
Really well said, Mark. Just a couple of questions to wrap up here. Are there any successful case studies or best practices from other cities or regions that the organizations in Phoenix can learn from when it comes to attracting and retaining diverse candidates from your perspective?
I think there are absolutely things organizations across the country are doing. I would be remiss not to mention Target. Target alum is proud of the work that they've done in Minneapolis and Minnesota. To really create a culture where folks feel like they belong. They've taken that a step further and they've extended it into their product collection. So wherever you shop in a Target store during Black History Month, they've got some amazing designers and collections as well as suppliers that they regularly feature. When I walk into a Target store, there is no doubt in my mind they are an organization that celebrates diversity and inclusion. Now, they've been through some stuff over the past month, and whether you agree, disagree, kind of where you fall, no one can argue that Target stands for and believes in diversity, equity, and inclusion. That connects to the candidate experience. The work that an organization does and highlights and showcases externally, that work that, in their stores that are set in Florida, resonate and can draw folks into Minneapolis. So yes, I think most of us know those organizations who have really been out there and leading on the forefront. Now, again, just like not everyone's going to be able to write a check, not everyone out there is going to be able to be a Target or a Nike or a fill in the blank of those organizations you think of that are really vocal and bold out there. Totally get that. And so the question is, what are the things that you can do internally and what are the things that you can do externally? Because there is, even if they're little things, those little things add up, and the potential talent from around the country, they're watching. They see those things. We regularly hear from candidates about the You Are Loved collection. So every June we put out a Pride collection. Rainbow collars and fish ornaments and cat toys, and it's a great collection. I love the collection, but we hear from candidates regularly saying, "Hey, I actually know PetSmart's going to be a fit for me." Because I see this. I see the actions that you're taking externally. And by the way, that means PetSmart stores across the US and Canada, we hear associates say, I can see myself working here. I can see myself fit. And so it's those organizations that are speaking externally. There are multiple examples of those. I mentioned a couple, but we try as well to send that message to folks that, hey, we're open to all.
For our audience listening, who should reach out to you and why, and what's the best way to connect with you or get in touch with our viewers?
anyone and everyone. In all seriousness, I love, one of the things about my job that I love is getting to connect with peers in the industry, or even folks that are just getting started that are like, we don't even have employee resource groups, Mark. Where do we start? What would you recommend? As you probably can tell, we've had multiple of these conversations now. I can talk all day long about this topic. I have a ton of passion in this space. And so best way to connect is on LinkedIn. But truly, if there are things, if there are partners, if there are strategies or processes that folks are interested in talking through, I honestly am happy to, scheduling out might be a little bit depending on the calendar, but I'm always happy to connect. I do love connecting with others on this space because I am a big believer. A lot of folks have paid it forward to me to be able to be in the position that I'm in today. The more that I can, and we as PetSmart can pay it forward to others, again, that tide rises, all of our boats rise. At the end of the day, folks get involved in this work. The folks listening that are still tuned in and that are listening to this, they're involved in this work because they care tremendously. No one gets involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion work because that looks like a step, and then I'll go on to something else. They get involved because they truly want to make a difference in this world, in the communities that they support, in the states, and in this world. We want to make a difference. And so that's why I say, truly, anyone, everyone that's still listening here, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat and share some of the success stories and some of the not success stories, because those exist as well. There are things that you learn over time that you probably wouldn't do again. And those can be just as valuable to avoid those missteps.
Thanks, Mark. I like how you mentioned as the tide rises, our boat rises. Definitely something I'm going to take and use in the future. And yeah, your passion for diversity, equity, inclusion, it definitely exudes, from your responses and the way you talk about it. So really appreciate you having you on today. The last question we have is there anything that you'd like to share or talk about in terms of the work you're doing today at PetSmart, or anything you're doing personally?
There are some really neat things that we are exploring. So we do mention monthly cultural milestones where we have celebrations. We actually, one of the things that we struggled with for years, and I've been in retail for quite a few years now, we've always struggled with is reaching the front lines, reaching the cashier, reaching the folks that are in the stores. And so we actually send a packet of content out to the stores each month with conversation prompts. We encourage radio chatter, so our stores have radios. Have that conversation around those question prompts on the radios. Post it in the break room on a whiteboard and put a little marker, and people can write their responses when they're in there on break. So we try to do little things like that to engage our frontline. We just in February rolled out a new social platform where it's app-based, and associates at anywhere in the company can download that, and they can actually interact with our associate resource groups. They can interact with our I Belong stories. We have an I Belong story series where associates from across the company, they tell some pretty personal stories. I'm very honored and humbled that associates trust us with their stories, because there are some very authentic and real stories, struggles, achievements, a variety of ways that they tell their stories. And so we feature those on our social platforms. We feature those on life at PetSmart.com. There's a dog barking out there in case you can hear it. It's proof that we are at PetSmart. Life at PetSmart.com, we have an entire I Belong series. And part of the reason for that is because we want folks outside of these four walls to know just how great it is and how authentic it is. When associates tell their stories and feel comfortable, in the last several town halls, we've had associates get up on stage and talk about what makes them different. We had an individual who lost his hearing as an adult, and he shared the story about how he couldn't hear his newborn cry, and the impact that it had on him, and the therapy he's gone through, and how never once at PetSmart has he felt like he didn't belong. Never once did he go into a meeting where someone wasn't willing to face him and have the conversation so he could read lips, and the closed captioning on all of the work that we do in videos. He feels like he belongs. To get up on stage in front of an entire company of people to tell that kind of story, those are the spaces where I say, you've created something magical. When your employee base says, hey, I'm willing to get up and I'm willing to tell this very personal story because I know it's going to make an impact on someone else, and it's going to help someone else say, I belong, I truly belong at PetSmart.
Love the initiatives and projects you're involved with at PetSmart, Mark. Keep up the good work, and we'll be cheering you on from the sidelines.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you to the team at Halo for giving me the opportunity to share some of my excitement and passion. And thank you to everyone who has tuned in today.